They lead, they enrich, they create, they help. You're listening to The CEOs on News Talk 770. Brought to you by TriView Capital with your host, Angela Kokot.
It all began in CB back in 1909 with the Horseshoe Fall Hydro Plant. A couple of years later, Calgary Power was born and electricity made its way to Alberta communities. It wasn't until 1981 when Calgary Power became TransAlta, Alberta's largest producer of electricity. Heading up the privately owned utility is my guest for this week's CEO series, the president and CEO of TransAlta, Dawn Farrell. Dawn, thanks so much for dropping by.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Angela.
There is a lot I want to find out about with TransAlta, but first of all, with the CEOs, it's more important that we find out about the CEO. So we want to get a little bit of background on who Dawn Farrell is. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Calgary. Went to school. I grew up in Fairview, a district in the southeast. Went to school there. Went to high school at Lord Beaverbrook. Went to U of C. So I'm a tried and true Calgarian. Lived away for about 5 years at the beginning of the decade and in 2000 or so. And so had some time in Vancouver, which I say makes me a Canadian now.
You've done the Vancouver thing.
Yeah.
What do you remember about growing up in the community of Fairview as a kid?
Well, in those days, Fairview was, it's kind of the lower end of what was going on. You know, we'd started out in Forest Lawn and got a bungalow in Fairview, but when I went to Lord Beaverbrook, the people coming into Lord Beaverbrook were from Bonavista, and Bonavista were the rich kids, and Fairview were the working class kids. So, what I mostly remember is playing kick the can on the front lawn, and going to school and just having the neighborhood kids,
You were an active kid?
I was a bookworm kid. I was one of these kids that I didn't see the inside of an institution until I went to the very first day of school in grade 1. And then I came home and immediately started doing homework because I thought school was such a great thing. But my father was very active. He's an outdoorsman. And so we spent a lot of our time camping and fishing and hunting, and he got us all into archery. I was an archer, so I competed in archery as a teenager. So, we kind of had a mixed life. We were either at my grandmother's farm or we were going to school in the city. He kept us very busy. He had a very interesting philosophy.
His philosophy was keep the kids busy and be outdoors?
He invented the idea that if your kids are with you, they're not in trouble. And so we were a really close family, did a lot of things together.
What was there, 3 kids in your family?
Yeah, I'm the oldest, and then my brother and sister.
Now tell me, though, about your parents and maybe the influence they had on you growing up.
Well, my parents were young when they got married, and so they were, I had the young parents at school, and they were very, very clear about what our family values were. And my father was very clear about what it meant to be an individual. And so we weren't the kids that got to do what everybody else did, right? So my grandmother had a dress store close to where we lived in Acadia. So my mother would work for her. My mother made arrows. My father became a beekeeper. We all built his all the bee boxes and, extracted honey and went hunting. So we were a very active family, very close. And my father was very influential because he was... He just believed that you had to argue everything out, and you could never just take anything at face value, which served me well as I grew up.
Wait, your mother made arrows? This is back to the
my
archery
mother
then?
made arrows, yeah. On the pool table in the basement was a big jig, and my mother would make arrows as she was running by to do the laundry, because that was her way of contributing to the household. And my father was a heavy-duty mechanic, but he liked to work for himself, so he started an apiary. We built it in the garage on Foley Road.
That must have been pretty cool, though, because it would have been an urban beekeeper then.
Yeah, well, no, he had his bees outside of the city.
Oh,
Eventually,
right.
They moved away, and they now live out by Stettler. But it wasn't cool. It was not cool to be in the garage building bee boxes when they're, you might get a date once in a while and the guy was picking you up from the garage. That was not cool, But it certainly taught us all about work ethic.
Work ethic. What about your grandma too then with the dress shop? Did you work in the dress shop as well?
Yeah, I started working in the dress store. She got me to clean her house when I was 12, and I got to start at the dress store when I was 13 because you weren't allowed to work in Alberta until you were 14, right? And my grandmother was quite an entrepreneur, so she had She had a dress store and horse races, and I worked down at the track and all that kind of stuff. So what was great about her is her training program was, okay, dear, here's the keys. This is where you drop the money. I'm off to the races. And probably no one will come in tonight. I'll train you in the morning. And I love that story because nowadays it's like, oh, I need training and I need this and I need that. And I can't do anything unless everybody tells me everything. And my family was very much about individual accountability. You can do it. Get out there and do it, right?
And that must have given you such a sense of self-confidence then, too.
Well, one of my bosses at TransAlta when I was young said it gave me a sense of irreverence. And I can remember the day that he said that. I actually said to him, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, you just don't realize who you're talking to. And it took me back to the kind of upbringing I had where independence, point of view, perspective was valued in our family.
In a respectful way, though.
In a respectful way, yeah. Oh, I don't know the arguments.
Maybe not so respectful.
Yeah, they were respectful, yeah.
So you mentioned that, through your mom and dad, a great work ethic. What else did you admire about them and your grandmother that probably helped you through your working career?
Well, I think if, people who know me know that work ethic is really important to me, and accountability and getting things done and following through and finishing. Everything in our house was about finishing, not starting. But secondly, my parents were very family oriented. And so everything was about family and kids and compassion and knowing people. So work ethic and really knowing people well and really being engaged and being authentic with people. I'd say those were the two key pivots in my life that they just go with you everywhere you go, right?
You're at Lord Beaverbrook, and you said the Bonavista kids were the rich kids. You came from the...
I have to be careful. They're all on this...
I think they knew where they were in the
whole...
whole...
They were the rich kids, yeah.
But was that also a great learning opportunity? Because sometimes people are in that situation and they see themselves as, okay, I'm not the rich kid. And it can become a bit of an incentive, too.
Yeah, I think that the story about them being the rich kids it's actually a story you tell backwards. I think in the moment when we were there, we were all just kids. And the groups and the gangs, it wasn't as big a deal back then, right? You just went to school and tried to get through. And there was a lot of mixing. All I knew about, the reason I always thought about the rich kids is because their parents went away on vacations and the parties were at their houses. We couldn't have the parties at our houses because our parents didn't.
Your parents were always there.
Our parents took us camping, right? Their parents went to Hawaii, so.
But gee, that's a good thing, though.
It was great that their parents went away, yes.
Know that your parents stayed home yes. And you had that real strong sense of family. And I'm going to find out more about your own family, but I want to take a break here because Dawn Farrell is my guest. She is the president and CEO of TransAlta. I want to know what happened after Lord Beaverbrook. I'm Angela Kokott. You're listening to The CEOs. We're back after this. And my guest this week is Dawn Farrell. She's the president and CEO of TransAlta. Before the break, we learned that she grew up in the southeast community of Fairview, went to Lord Beaverbrook. After Lord Beaverbrook, was it the University of Calgary?
Actually, because nobody had ever gone to university in our home, so it was hard for me to figure out how to do that. So I ended up going up to Grand Prairie to work in a newspaper. I thought I wanted to be a writer. And then I learned very quickly that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I started out at Grand Prairie Regional College and then transferred down to U of C. And that was very lucky for me. It's a little bit like sometimes when people end up going to smaller institutions first because you kind of get your feet underneath you. And so I got a great start up at the college there, transferred to U of C, and then I finished my master's degree there.
It could have been a different experience if you had gone straight to U of C, you're saying.
I often think about that. I could have gone to U of C and not really made it even through the first semester, but we had these small classes and these great professors, and they just really took care of you and got you started. So,
who influenced you to go to the University of Calgary? Or, as you say, you didn't really have anyone in your family that you could follow in their steps.
That was all. If you were going to, my parents lived here, so I came back to go to U of C, and then they left and moved to out by Delia. My father bought a teacherage and really got his bee business going. So then you really were on your own, sort of thing.
The University of Calgary, how proud were your parents then, if you're the oldest of their 3 kids and you're going to university?
My father, he said to me probably from the time I was 2, you're going to university. And he'd just say, look, your whole family, they were small business people, entrepreneurs, working people, tradespeople, and there's a very strong value system that goes along with that. So he wasn't saying you need to go to university because you couldn't do what we all do. He just really thought that it was important that one of us got a university education, and it was going to be me. So if I hadn't gone to university, I don't know what would have happened,
And that's probably part of the close family. And I don't know, that sense of not wanting to let your dad down, or was it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How important that is. So was it difficult to decide what you were going to major in because you did a BCom?
Well, that's really interesting, and this is for young people. You hear all these young people out there all think they have to go do business and all this sort of thing. And I got to the BCom program because when I went to the college, the lady said to me, "If you could pick the job at the newspaper, which would it be?" And I said, "Oh, that's easy. I'd own the place and run it." And she said, "Okay, you should take a commerce degree." But when I got to university, my first economics course I loved it, and I denied myself taking economics as my major, finished my degree, and it was an economics professor who talked me into doing a master's in economics, which is really the heart and soul of who I am. I'm not really an economist. Economists study and do work, but I use economics every day. So I really feel strongly that people should follow what they're good at and what they do, and then they can apply it, in different ways.
And had you done it differently then, because I'm just trying to figure out, you thought, commerce, because that's what someone at Grand Prairie had suggested. But had you done it differently, how would you have found your way into economics?
Well, it's lucky that in the business school, you take economics as a starter,
right?
So you can have it as an option. So I ended up using it as most of my options. And then that set me up to be able to go on. What I didn't know then, which I now know, is I could have done a commerce degree and still done a master's in economics. People just don't know that you just have to take a few more courses. It's just a master's level degree. So that turned out to be a good foundational degree for me for what I was going to do in my career. And of course, I had no plan. I didn't really know what I was going to do in my career. But once I got into TransAlta, I could use that discipline almost every day.
How did you land in TransAlta? Was that the first job out of university?
Yeah, and that's a great story. And again, my grandfather had a saying, be careful who you're talking to because you never know who it is. And in one of my master's classes, my very first boss was there. I didn't know he was going to be my first boss. And he was having trouble, getting to the school because he was working at TransAlta. So he asked me if I could have his note. I could lend him my notes. So I got him my notes and textbooks and underline and a whole bunch of stuff. And when I went for my interview at TransAlta, he was there. And it was like, wow, that was such a lucky break, right? So he hired me. And
that was after the degree, though? I mean, after your master's?
Yeah.
And what was the first job?
I was a forecast economist. I ran a big model of the Alberta economy in 1985 when we were in exactly the same problem that we're in today. Oil prices had fallen, the place was falling apart, and I was trying to forecast electricity demand. So,
gee, that's a huge learning curve.
Yeah, it was. It was.
You didn't stay at TransAlta forever. I mean, you had a few breaks. Where did you go after How long were you in TransAlta for that first time?
I was at TransAlta for 18 years.
18 years,
yeah,
okay.
And I had a number of different jobs there. And I really go back to my first boss. He was quite a mentor, and I would say that many of the people that worked for him became leaders in their lives because of how much he coached us and worked us. But in 2003, I decided to leave, and I went to BC Hydro, which took us to Vancouver for about 5 years. And then I decided to come back, and I came back to TransAlta.
You missed Calgary? Or was it an opportunity?
No, my husband missed Calgary. Our family was here. Our girls had gone to high school in BC, and they were going to university, and it just seemed like a good time, yeah.
Go back to your boss that you mentioned was a great mentor, because I'm curious if whatever he instilled in you, you try to instill in your own employees, the people who are under you.
The very first day of work, so I have no work experience in the power industry, and I have a degree, and I've worked extracting honey in my dad's honey house. Those were my summer jobs, right? So when I I can remember at lunchtime, we'd be sitting across, like you and I. He was sitting across the table. He had a stack of paper this high, which is really high for those in radio.
She's
land
got
who
about
can't
3
see it.
feet there,
Yeah.
yes.
And he started with the sheet off the top, and he said, okay, this assignment. And over the course of 2 hours, he laid out, his name was Dale Honeyford, if he's out there listening. And Dale lays out, here's all your work plan. Well, he gave me about 1.5 years of work in 2 hours. And I didn't even know what I was doing. And he did that to all of us. And what was great about that is you just kind of leave his office with your eyebrows raised, having a heart attack. But you just try to do the work, and he'd coach and support you. And he was always set a very high bar about what you could do. So he always had this sense that you were bigger and could do more than the sense you had for yourself. So that's been a big influence in my.
And you try to do that the same then? Do you have an opportunity to pass that on to other people?
I do that a lot. I think people, I'm pretty demanding, and I think sometimes people don't. They wouldn't say it as generously about me as they would about Dale, because when you're in it, it feels like, oh my gosh, right?
Right. Those kind of traits, though, and I'm applying them to a business situation, do you find yourself applying them to your own? You have 2 daughters?
Yes.
When your girls were growing up, because sometimes, mom is working, but yet I'm wondering what you were able to transfer over to family life.
Well, my husband and I raised 2 girls together, and my husband was a great partner in crime in that, right? Which you have to do if you've got 2 people working. But I would say if you were interviewing my daughters, they would say, yeah, my mom did that to us too. We were always expected to do more, and they would probably say that today as well.
Because you believed in them though too.
Well, because I believe, actually, I believe in everybody. I think every single person, no matter where they come from and no matter what they've done and no matter what their background is, has more in them than they know. And you can't see it yourself. Somebody has to help you see it for yourself.
Do you wonder, because it's great to compare your daughters, they're in their 20s now, and you growing up, and I'm wondering if just the times are different that, and maybe I'm getting too psychological here, do we not let our children fail? There's that whole discussion around we have to praise our kids so much. Heaven forbid they actually don't get a participation
it's interesting
ribbon.
that you bring that up, because the number one movie that's being discussed in our house right now that we're all like just at it is this Whiplash. Right?
Oh, yes. I just saw
because
last week.
Whiplash is the opposite of that. And
Whiplash, of course, if you haven't seen it is a young guy who wants to be a jazz drummer, and he goes to this music school where the teacher is, well, he seems bipolar, but anyway, he is a tyrannical leader.
Nutcase.
Yeah, nutcase. So,
I'm not like that.
Not like that. But why is that such a hits home for your family?
We all have a different view of the movie, right? So some of them think that I'm right, they're wrong, by the way. But some of them think that it's all about that kid wouldn't have been as good, and that really the teacher made him good, and without the teacher he couldn't have been good. I think that in the end, when the kid came out and did what he did, which I won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it, that he showed that he had the final determination to beat that guy no matter what. And so I think it's a combination, right? It's someone who drags it out of you, and it's your own personal determination. And that combination is what gets people to where they want to go, right?
Well, we know that Dawn Farrell went to BC Hydro but came back. And coming up after the break, I want to talk a little bit more about her journey back to TransAlta, but also the fact that she is a woman in a very powerful role. She is very involved with the federal government's advisory council for promoting women on boards. I want to find out about that. But more importantly, do you really know where the electricity comes when you turn on your lights? I'm Angela Kokott. This is the CEOs. We're back after this. Enjoying my conversation with Dawn Farrell. She is the president and CEO of TransAlta. Dawn, after BC Hydro, what year is it that you come back to Calgary?
2007.
And you said it was kind of timing. Your husband missed Calgary. Your girls had finished high school. They were starting their post-secondary. When you came back to TransAlta, did you have to start on the bottom again?
No, I got to start at the job that I wanted. So I ran our trading and development groups. So, and I'd done these kinds of jobs before, prior to leaving TransAlta. But what I got from BC Hydro was operations experience, because I ran the generation operations at BC Hydro. So in 2009, I took over as chief operating officer, which allowed me to run the trading and all of the plants and sort of engineering the whole thing. And that really got me ready to be the CEO in 2012 when I got the rest of the company. So.
You are part, as I mentioned before the break, you serve on the Canadian federal government's Advisory Council for Promoting Women on Boards. Long title. What's the goal of that?
Well, the goal, I mean, there's always been a frustration, I think, that there are a lot of qualified women in the business world, but the boards have mostly been dominated by males, and there's long stories about why that is. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of qualified women. So, and I think a lot of people do believe that men and women working together actually make a really positive and strong team. And so diversity does count and it does matter. We have a lot of it inside TransAlta. We've got 30% women on our board. We've got 30% women on our management team. We've got a number of women VPs that are in operational positions. And then we've got women coming up through the organization. And I think what often happened to women is they were in the disciplines that were on the sides of the company. They were in finance or HR or procurement. They were never in operations. And so we've had to work. And that's why I left TransAlta. I wanted an operating job. And I went to BC Hydro to get an operating job because I needed that to become a CEO. And so we're doing that at TransAlta. So I think this initiative by the federal government is really promoting getting women onto boards. And those of us in business that are passionate about this issue are doing our part by promoting getting women to take operating positions so that they can get the kind of qualities that they need to, do well on boards.
I think whenever we have this discussion, though, it always comes down to man or woman, you still want to have the best qualified person. And so sometimes people are critical about initiatives that say, well, we've got to change the number of men versus women. We don't want to just have change for the sake of change. We still want to have the best people in those positions.
But to defend the men, in the past, most boards were CEOs. It was CEOs that sat on boards of other CEOs. Now with corporate governance and the way the world works, most CEOs can only really handle one other board other than their own company. And so they can't do 2 or 3 boards. So now boards don't have the opportunity to recruit CEOs on. And of course, most CEOs were men. Now, about a third of the boards would be active CEOs. Some would be past CEOs. But there are a lot of professions that go on boards. There's lawyers, there's accountants, there's auditors. Those professions are all full of women. They're 50-50 women, and so there are a lot of women that are available for those positions, and they are the most capable, and they can easily be recruited onto boards. So the requirements for boards have changed. People are requiring more diversity on their boards. They're requiring diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of discipline, and so that conversation it's old now. That conversation about there's only qualified men is an old conversation. It doesn't exist anymore.
In 2012, when you became the president and CEO of TransAlta, was it just a natural step for you? Were you surprised that they approached you, or you knew that this is the job I want?
Well, I was one of these people who knew that I probably wanted to lead a company when I was 28, and then by the time I was 50, I was more nervous about doing it than I was when I was 28. But it was the next step. I was a chief operating officer, so I had hoped that it would happen. But you've got to be qualified. You'd had to have done all the work that you need to do to get there. And I was glad that I had all the background that I did, because it's a big job. It's a big, heavy job. It's a big, heavy job.
All right, let's talk about TransAlta, because people hear about TransAlta and they know it has something to do with electricity.
Well, here's what they don't know about TransAlta. So TransAlta is an international company. We have operations in Western Australia, Western United States, and across Canada. We're a generator, and we have a marketing and trading company, so we serve customers directly. We are the largest renewable company in Canada, with 1,000 megawatts of wind across Canada and 1,000 megawatts of hydro. We're 50% coal, 25% gas, and 25% renewables. We are low cost and pride ourselves in the work that we do on operational excellence. And in the Alberta market, it's a deregulated market. So we are no longer a utility. Every dime that we make at TransAlta, we fight for every day. We have a number of long-term contracts that support our cash flows, but we have to be competitive. We have to fight for all our new business. And we've just recently invested $1 billion in Western Australia. It's a very, very successful investment strategy for us. And, people that think about wanting to be with TransAlta have to think about that. So about 60% of what we do is here in Alberta.
When you talk about the customers, though, are these major commercial customers?
Yeah. Yeah, so for us, what we pride ourselves in is we like what we call the behind the fence market. So we have customers like Suncor, where we're the generator behind the fence up in Poplar Creek, up north in Fort McMurray. We have a big cogeneration operation in Sarnia for a number of customers there. At Dow in Western Australia, there's a company called FMG, BHP, a bunch of mines there. So we have those kinds of customers. We also sell power, though, to the Costco's and the 7-Elevens of here in Alberta.
Right. So then the next question is the economy and the impact it has on your operations, because I know you've had a couple of projects, and I'm trying to remember Dunvegan. What was the one we were talking about, the hydro?
Yeah, Dunvegan and Sun 7. So let me talk. So the economy for the electricity people, typically when the economy has a downturn, like what we're seeing here, you still all turn your lights on, and we still need the same amount of electricity we needed yesterday. It's very, very slow for the electricity demand to react. Where we get the reaction is in the longer term. So there's been a lot of projects canceled or deferred by the oil companies. That's our future growth. Mm-hmm. So if our future growth gets pushed off, then if our project like Sun 7, which is a gas plant that we were looking at building towards the end of this decade, it will get pushed out as well. Dunvegan, unfortunately, hydro is too expensive right now. Natural gas is $2. Yeah. It's keeping the price of electricity very low. The hydro facilities need twice the money to be built, right?
And it's interesting because a lot of times people forget that Calgary is more a natural gas city. I mean, when it comes to a lot of the businesses. And so when we see weak natural gas prices, we know that's hurting a number of companies in this city. However, weak natural gas prices are good when we look at how much we pay for electricity.
Oh, they're great for your power bill.
Right.
They bring your power bill down quite a bit, yeah.
Let's take one more break here because Dawn Farrell is my guest on the CEO. She's the president and CEO of TransAlta. I want to look down the road to the future plans for TransAlta and also Dawn's commitment in the community. I always like to finish off the show with that because we find our CEOs are so busy in the community giving back. I'm Angela Kokott along with Dawn Farrell. You're listening to the CEOs. We're back after this. Dawn Farrell is my guest. She is the president and CEO of TransAlta. Before the break, Dawn, you were saying, yes, weak natural gas prices help electricity prices overall. But weak economies, they mustn't be helpful to your business, though.
Yeah, I mean, if oil prices stay flat in Alberta for a long time, you don't need very much demand here. You don't need more power plants. So TransAlta, luckily we have a diversified portfolio. So we do work in Washington State. We do work in Western Australia. We are lucky enough that in all the areas where we look for growth, Saskatchewan is growing, Quebec is growing. We can actually try to get power projects in those other regions, and that's what we focus on. But I've been through this cycle. I'm a Calgarian, right? I've been through this cycle like many of us have here for a long time. I do think at the end of the day, the cycle will be good because we'll get our costs in line. At the same time, we're tough as Albertans, so we will be competitive in the global market, and I do think the investment will come back to Alberta, and they'll need electricity. So I'm very much positioning the company for a strong future here in Alberta, but as well, we're looking at other regions for business opportunities.
Dawn, you say we've been through this before, and you're right to a point, because sometimes I think when we look back at whether it was the NEP that forced things in the early 80s, let's see here, in 07, 08, 09, I thought that was more of a global banking problem. And now we're looking at strictly it is OPEC oil prices and how much is maybe out of our control. So do you think this is a little bit different than the downturns we've been in the past?
I think when people look at it, I mean, the OPEC countries rely on pretty high oil prices to support their economies, right? So if they can do anything about it over the long term, they probably will. I think if you look at the investment that's required, so my numbers are this, 90 million barrels a day is what the globe demands. Mm-hmm. You take $80 billion out of future investment in Alberta alone, never mind wherever else is coming out of, and you don't put that into getting oil. Oil is it's a rat race, right? You've got to invest to get that oil out. The supply is a little bit greater than the demand. So that 90 million barrels a day is coming down. So that means we all either have to drive less, or developing countries have to develop less, because supply would have to, or demand would have to come down quite a bit. So in my view is, over the next couple of years, you'll see some price increase. Will it go back to 100? Everybody's saying no. I do think there are good technologies coming in to compete against oil. Solar is coming. The electric car is coming. They're all going to compete. But I also think the global economy is growing.
You say 50% coal generated electric
in Alberta,
and then you've got 25 natural gas, 25 in
Renewables.
renewable. When do we see coal even lower than that?
Well, I would say, for sure, under the current federal
Yes.
rules by the federal government, probably by the end of 2030, Alberta will have maybe 10% coal. It goes down that dramatically. So all of our coal plants, except for two that we have, will begin to transition out from 2019 to 2029. Some of them will look at life extending using carbon capture and storage. Some of them we might convert to gas. But effectively, traditional conventional coal will phase out in this province. Has to be replaced with something. It'll be gas, it'll be renewables, it'll be, other storage. We're looking at some storage.
And that's always the conversation around coal. It's easy to say you should be closing down the coal-fired plants. Coal is cheap, though.
Well, in Alberta coal, what's not known, and I want to get this in, is Alberta coal is cheap and clean. So Alberta coal is low sulfur. That coal in the prairies is low sulfur. The air sheds around the coal plants are very clean, so it's low NOx. We take out the particulate matter, and as well, we take the mercury out of our coal. So the coal in Alberta is cheap. It's in the $30 range, and it's clean. So it's just a CO2 issue that we have to deal with. And I think we need to find, a framework for that, because I think Albertans have had cheap power because of coal.
You were an outdoorsy girl growing up, whether or not it was because of your parents, but still, you were in touch with the outdoors. No matter what we do, even if we move towards more renewable resources, if we look at wind, if we look at solar, there seems to always be a downside to things.
Oh, yeah. There's a footprint everywhere, right?
Right.
Yeah. Windmills they take up a lot of footprint. There's issues with birds and bees, that
and
sort
bats.
of thing, and bats.
Yeah.
Hydro, there's always issues with fish and flooding and things like that. So I would say overall, you have to holistically look at each thing. It's good to have a diversity of supply. There is a balance, and I think net, what I notice about producers in Alberta is they all work hard to do the both and. We're both and people, both the environment and the economy. So when you're getting your supply in Alberta, you're getting a lot of investment. And we also invest in it. I wanted to take a moment to talk about our community investments. We also invest in the communities we live in. And all of that, I think, makes up what you've got to be able to do to, go into the future.
TransAlta invests in the communities. Dawn Farrell, what are some things that are near and dear to your heart?
Well, I know you're going to sell the chuck wagons after this.
Yes, I'm going to be selling those chuck wagons. I'm going to be watching the canvas auction. Probably won't be buying any, but yeah.
But so, just to put in a pitch for the Stampede. So I was on the Stampede board. TransAlta is a big supporter of the Grandstand Show. But what's underneath that is we're the supporter of the young Canadians. We support their school. We support their show. We support the children. I love those young Canadians and the fact that they come from all over the city. Doesn't matter what their economic situation is. If they can do the hard work, and it goes back to work ethic, they can be a young Canadian. We support up in Edmonton the Mother Earth School, which is a school with 100 Aboriginal children in it, that is close to our facilities up there. So we have a real passion for it. We support the United Way. So we've just started a program called Light Up the World, where our people go to Peru and they install photovoltaic solar installations in remote and rural areas, which is a fantastic program because it teaches our people about what it's like to have nothing and make, and be able to do some really good work in the community. So I think community work is critically important, especially around big plants and around the areas where we live and work. But going back to the Stampede, Angela needs lots of money for those trucks, guys. So get out there and give her the money, especially this year, right?
Especially this year. All right, one more break here. Dawn Farrell is my guest, and she is the president and CEO of TransAlta. Yeah, she just rattled off a whole bunch of things that TransAlta is involved in. I got to find out Dawn Farrell's own little personal interest. We'll do that after this. Dawn Farrell is the president and CEO of TransAlta. And Dawn, it was great to hear all the different projects that TransAlta is involved in, especially in giving back to communities that they are a part of. But Dawn Farrell's efforts and maybe organizations that are near and dear to your heart, what would those be?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Mother Earth School is near and dear to my heart. So it's a big thing for me that we keep that school going and make sure we get the funding that we need for that. My husband and I are big supporters and have been for a long time of World Vision. So we do a lot of World Vision donations there, and United Way. Lucy and the team over at United Way, I was able to help them a couple years ago.
That was with Police Chief Rick Hansen turned politician.
Yeah, that was we had a great year doing that. But, I like what United Way does because they know the issues. I can give them money and they can figure out where the issues are and support those issues. But frankly, at this point with my work at TransAlta, I spend most of my time either working at TransAlta or connecting. I have 4 grandchildren, my daughters and my son-in-law and my husband, and just keeping all of that together and staying connected with my parents and my brothers and sisters. So I don't do the kind of community work that maybe others do, but I'm still a mom.
You're still a mom. That's a pretty big job. And, now that your daughters are in their late 20s, do you look back and say, we always talk about that work-life balance, and I know sometimes that plays more for women. However, I've had lots of male CEOs that admit that they probably didn't spend enough time with their family because they were so focused on their jobs. Is it different for Dawn Farrell?
My girls and I were talking about this the other day, and my daughter said to me, well, Mom, the best thing you said to me was that work-life balance happens over a lifetime. It doesn't happen over a day or in a week. And so, you have to be pretty long-term about it. And, I want my girls to have the same family experience that I did. Our family and our extended families are close. But they're very understanding when, I'm the person who's coming to the birthday party at the very last minute, or they're having to go get the present at the mall so that I can run in the door with it and hand it to somebody. Because at the end of the day, we keep family work-life balance over a lifetime. They're ambitious to do things. I'm ambitious to do things. And we stay connected in each other's worlds. And I think that's the way I look at it. But I can't get it done in a day. That's for sure.
And as you said, it really took 2 of you to raise the family.
And I'm very fortunate because my husband is absolutely a partner in, he's the one who's babysitting the grandkids and changing the diapers and getting the kids to school and picking them up and helping my daughter, not me. But he enjoys that. And between the 2 of us, we've always traded off. We never did that 50-50 thing. It was 100-0. Mm-hmm. Whoever was there did the work. So,
and 50-50, I don't think is even really realistic.
It's not even realistic, right? So I think, would I have liked to have done more with my girls? Yes. Would they have liked me to do more with them? No, because what they say is, well, at least we didn't have a helicopter, Mom. We could rely on you to be there. You always knew what was going on. You were there in the tough times, but they also got to grow up and be independent. They grew up much the same way I did. They're independent. They're on their own. They're launched. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's what I wanted for them.
I want to go back to your husband one more time because I'm not going to ask how old you were when you were married, but I think sometimes that's sort of a key in the partner that you choose and the ability to know where one person is going, one person is focused, but somehow we're going to work as a team.
Yeah, my husband, we've been married 33 years, and we were young when we got married. I can say without question, my husband sacrificed his career for my career. And, I think I've always felt bad. I feel bad about that. But we made the decision somewhere, it kind of happened, probably when we moved to Vancouver, that it would be my career that would bring the financial side of it, and then it would be what he did in his time that would make our family stay together. So he keeps our family solid together, and that's how it's worked. So I don't think we actually believe that you can have 2 highly charged careers like I have in a house and make it. Somebody had to give, and it was him.
And kudos to him, because I think too often you always hear that it's got to be the man. I
Right.
can't believe, you let your wife be the one who was the career person.
Yeah, well,
know?
he's interesting. My husband's he loves business. He loves TransAlta as much as I do. I call him TransAlta's #1 shareholder advocate, because if he doesn't like what I'm doing, I'm in trouble, right? So he's on top of the business, and he loves what we're doing there, and we kind of do it together effectively. He has to come to all the stuff, which he does.
Well, that's
not
the
like.
teamwork.
Yeah, it's the teamwork, right?
Yeah.
So
And he makes it work. And
yeah.
it makes it work. You're right. Dawn, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. I know you're a busy woman and you managed to carve out an hour for us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's great to meet you, and good luck with your show. It's a nice show. It's
All
good.
right. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. Dawn Farrell, she is the president and CEO of TransAlta. We've got news coming up next.